A mother's most private place is her bedroom, the room she retreats to at night for peace. But my son-in-law, Martin, used to quietly crack that door open every night. Do you know what hurt the most? When I told my own daughter, Naphtali, she didn't believe me. She believed him. She defended her husband. She called me a liar. She said I was senile. But there was something they didn't know. A silent eye in that room had been recording their betrayal every single night. And I swore I would bring that shameful truth to light in front of the whole family. My name is Nancy, and I've spent the last few years of my 73-year life enduring the greatest trial I've ever known. After my dear husband Austin passed away, I moved in with my only child, my beloved daughter, Naphtali. At first, it felt like the right thing to do. I wouldn't be alone in my old age, and I could finally breathe in the sweet scent of my grandchild every day. From the tiny window that looked out onto the familiar streets of Detroit, I used to whisper to myself how lucky I was. Children are your heart, they say. And I was with mine, in safe hands. Their home was a modest little apartment. I became the quiet corner of that home. I'd wash my face in the mornings, read a book, and live in my own world without bothering a soul. My days pass sipping coffee while watching people come and go from the window or knitting little booties for my grandson, Boris. My presence in that home was almost invisible, and I didn't mind. A mother only ever wants peace for her child, Martin. My son-in-law seemed like a respectful man from the outside. He always called me Mom and asked if I needed anything. But there was a coldness in his eyes that never quite warmed me. A fleeting look here, a strange chill there. It was as if something dark was hiding beneath those glances. When I sensed it, I chalked it up to old age. I'd tell myself, let it go, Nancy. I pushed those bad thoughts aside. After all, he was my daughter's husband. He was the man of the house. Everything started with that small retirement check. It wasn't much, just a few dollars left from Austin's pension, but to me, it was a treasure. That money was proof that I wasn't a burden. I didn't rely on anyone. I stitched my own seams, paid my own way. I kept the money in a small pouch inside an old chest my mother had passed down to me. One day, I opened the pouch to buy a gift for Boris, and I noticed some of the money was missing. At first, I was confused. Had I remembered wrong? Did I spend more than I thought at the market? Maybe my memory was playing tricks on me. I scolded myself quietly. Nancy, you're really starting to lose it, I muttered. That's the cruel part of aging. Your first instinct is to doubt your own mind. So, I didn't say anything to anyone. I was too ashamed. I didn't want to blame someone else for what might have been my own forgetfulness. But when it happened again, the following week, a cold suspicion crept into my heart. I scolded myself. Ah, Nancy, you really are losing it. That's the hardest part of getting old. You begin to doubt your own mind. That's why I didn't tell anyone. I was ashamed. I didn't want to burden someone else with what I thought was just my own forgetfulness. But when the same thing happened again, a week later, a cold suspicion crept into my heart. This time, I was sure. I had counted the money the day before, bill by bill. The issue wasn't just the missing cash anymore. It was the fact that someone had reached into my most sacred place, violated the sanctity of that old chest. There was a thief. And that thief was someone living under the same roof as me. That thought alone kept me awake at night. The first person who came to mind was my daughter, Naphtali. But I immediately pushed that thought away. My daughter would never do something like that. If she needed something, she'd come to her mother and ask. That left only one person, my son-in-law, Martin. I suddenly recalled his fake smiles, the way he said mom without any warmth. But how could it be? How could someone do that too? His wife's mother, an old woman who had opened her home and heart to him. The idea was so vile, I didn't want to believe it. But the real devastation came that night. I was in the lightest phase of my sleep when the creak of my bedroom door startled me. I didn't open my eyes. I held my breath and lay completely still. Even though my door was always shut tight, I could see now that it was slightly ajar. A shadow moved through the darkness, gliding silently across the room and heading straight for the chest. A few seconds later, just as silently, the figure slipped out and gently pulled the door closed. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst through my chest. The shadow I saw belonged to Martin, my son-in-law. I didn't sleep a wink for the rest of the night. I was consumed by fear, disappointment, and a crushing helplessness. This was no longer a suspicion. It was a painful truth. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about my dignity, my safety, my very existence. In that home, that man had entered my private space. He hadn't just stolen something that belonged to me, he had violated my soul. The next morning, my hands were trembling at the breakfast table. I waited for Martin to leave for work. Then, I summoned all the courage I had and sat down in front of Naphtali, with a lump in my throat. I stammered as I tried to explain what had happened. I told her about the missing money and the shadow I'd seen. My daughter, I said softly, Martin was in my room last night. Her face changed instantly, but not in the way I'd hoped. Not with concern. With anger, she didn't believe a single word I said. Mom, what are you even saying? Naphtali snapped. Why would Martin go into your room? Not this again. To her, I was just a bitter old woman trying to ruin her home. The more I tried to explain what I saw, the angrier she got. She raised her voice and then came the words that stabbed my heart like a blade. She said, "You're getting old, Mom. You're imagining things. Maybe you just put the money somewhere else and forgot. You're accusing Martin for no reason." Those were the most painful words a mother could ever hear from her own child. Right at that moment, I noticed Martin standing at the hallway entrance. He had heard every word. He looked straight at me, and for a second I saw it. The smug smile of a man who had just won a battle. Then, just as quickly, he wiped it away and slipped back into his mask, the worried, innocent husband Natalie expected to see. That was the moment everything became clear. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was an alliance against me. To them, I was just a senile old woman, an easy target. My daughter's refusal to believe me hurt far more than Martin's betrayal. That day, I realized I was utterly alone in this house. And if I was going to survive this silent war, I'd have to fight it on my own. They didn't know it yet, but the real storm was only just beginning. I stepped into my room and slowly closed the door behind me. This room, these four walls, were now my only sanctuary. But my daughter's voice still echoed in my ears. "You're imagining things, Mom." That wasn't just a lack of belief. It was a denial of my mind, my memory, and my entire life. Maybe the cruelest way to kill someone while they're still breathing. And when it's your own blood who does it, there are no words to describe that pain. I looked at my hands, wrinkled, calloused hands, worn down from decades of work. Hands that had done everything for Naphtali. I closed my eyes, and I saw her again, just a little girl, burning with fever. I hadn't left her side for a second. I'd placed cold cloths on her forehead, held her tiny hands in my palms, and whispered desperate prayers all night. I didn't just ask God to heal her. I begged him to give me her pain, to take it away from her and give it to me. And now, were these the hands of a liar? Of a woman who sees things that aren't real? They say, one pain awakens another. My helplessness in that moment took me years back. My eyes fell on my bare wrist, one that bore no mark except for age. I remembered when Natalie divorced her first husband. She was drowning in debt. She cried. 4 nights, completely lost. Asterisk back then, seeing my precious only daughter like that was worse than dying. Without hesitation, I opened my chest. Inside, I took out the 2 thick gold bracelets that my late mother had given me at my wedding. Those were my entire fortune, the money I had saved for hard times. But a child's bad day is a mother's worst day. Those bracelets were nothing compared to my daughter's tears. I still remember the words I said as I placed the bracelets in her palm that day. I told her, "My daughter, a single drop of your tear is more valuable than this gold. Take these and pay off your debt. Just let that beautiful face of yours smile." Natalie hugged me tightly around my neck and cried with sobs full of gratitude and love. At that moment, I thought I had gained not just the bracelets, but my daughter's eternal love and loyalty. How wrong I was. Now I was asking myself, where was that grateful girl? Where had that loyal child gone? In her place was a stranger who called her mother a liar while defending a thief. The gold was gone. I wasn't sad about the gold, but the unconditional love and trust I thought I had gained in return were gone too. That was true poverty. A mother's sacrifice isn't made expecting something in return. You don't say, "I did this for you." You just give. That's what I did. I sacrificed my own security for her peace of mind. Now, the thief was stealing the money left over from that sacrifice, and my daughter was shielding her. This was the cruelest form of ingratitude. The days that followed were no different than being in a prison. There was a heavy tension in the house that no one spoke about. Natalie barely spoke to me. Unless she had to, she didn't even look at me. Martin, on the other hand, smothered me with fake attention. When Nancy asked, "Mom, do you need anything?" only I could see that mocking sparkle in her eyes. It was a silent, psychological torture. By then, I was like a ghost in my own daughter's house. To avoid sitting at the same table with them, I ate my meals alone in my room. Loneliness had become a tangible weight pressing down on me. The pain of betrayal was a constant ache in my chest. They didn't just want my money, they wanted me. They expected me to quietly disappear, to accept the senile old woman story they had made up about me. I reached for the photo of my late husband on the nightstand. I took the frame in my hands and quietly confided in him. "Oh, my dear Austin," I whispered, "you left me alone in this cruel world. You always said the heart of our family was made of gold. Where is that heart now? Did they steal that too?" Remembering my late husband's honorable stance gave me a bit of strength. Austin would never have accepted such dishonor, such disrespect. It felt like a spark from his firm resolve had jumped into my soul. My pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by a silent, deep anger. I realized that the sacrifices I had made in the past meant nothing to them. They didn't see love as something to be thanked for, but rather as a duty that had to be done. They had become a matter of forgetfulness, not loyalty. My love was taken for granted, and my trust was doubtful. I would not accept this equation. They had erased my past and my sacrifices. By calling me a liar, they were trying to erase my present as well. But there was one thing they didn't realize. By doing this, they gave me the strength to fight for my future. I was going to prove to them, no matter what it took, that Nancy's words would one day have value again. Asterisk, this was an important promise I had made to myself, and to my late husband. After that day, the silence hanging over the house grew even heavier. It wasn't a peaceful silence, it was a storm. Before the storm, there's that eerie electric-charged stillness in the air. I was in my room, they were in other parts of the house, and it felt like there were invisible but unbreakable walls between us. I was a prisoner in my own daughter's home. Every step I took, every breath I breathed, felt like walking on a fragile glass about to shatter on. Then the awaited moment came again. A few nights later, I heard that vile creak once more. This time, my heart didn't beat with fear, but with cold, burning rage. I squeezed my eyes shut tight and froze stiff under the covers. I was no longer sleeping or waiting. Like a hunter stalking its prey, I etched every sound into my mind. Even the presence in my room, the very act of breathing, polluted my soul. I heard those soft footsteps, the muffled sounds on the old carpet, the familiar slight creak of my drawer, the rustle of banknotes. Each noise was a blow to my dignity. A single tear rolled down my cheek, this time not from helplessness but pure anger born from humiliation. It slid down and disappeared into the coldness of my pillow. When the door quietly closed behind Martin as he left the room, I stayed still. For a long time, I lay there in the dark. This second intrusion hurt as much as the first, maybe even more, because this time it wasn't a surprise. It was a planned, deliberate, and degrading act. He knew I knew. He showed, staring me straight in the face, that he didn't care and utterly disregarded me. The next morning, I didn't say a word. What could I say? What words could describe such wickedness? But my silence and my painful gaze were louder and more powerful than the loudest scream. Naphtali noticed my trembling hands holding my coffee cup at breakfast, my eyes bloodshot like pools of red. The expression on her face was less worry and more exhaustion and anger. Whether it was fear of her husband's suspicions or the possibility that I might be right, all the anger inside her exploded. After breakfast, as I withdrew to my room, she followed behind me. Martin appeared in the doorway, playing the innocent husband, trying to calm his wife as usual. Naphtali could no longer hold back. She took a step toward me and shouted, with a venomous voice, "Enough, Mom, enough. What's with that face? I'm tired of your silent hints and accusing looks." Her word struck the walls of the house like a whip. I just kept looking at her. In those eyes that once shone with love, there was now only anger and a stranger I didn't recognize. My silence, my calm demeanor, only made her more furious. She interpreted my silence stubbornly as an accusation. And then she dealt the final blow. She asked the cruel question that could tear a mother's heart out. Her voice was trembling with rage this time. "What is your goal? Are you jealous of my happiness? Are you trying to destroy my home with your lies? Tell me, what is your problem?" Those words were the last drop that overflowed the glass. Being accused of destroying her own child's home, no insult could be heavier, no wound deeper. At that moment, I felt something inside me break. All the hope I had clung to until then, shattered to pieces. The old Nancy, who begged, cried, and longed to be understood, died in that room with her last sentence. I tore my eyes away from my daughter and looked at Martin standing at the door. Behind his shocked act, I saw the triumph. I saw the puppeteer and his helpless puppet controlled by his strings. Without saying a word, I turned my back on them. I walked toward the window, looking out at the meaningless crowd on the street. My mind was clearer than ever. I understood now. Words were useless. Tears were weakness. They had chosen their own reality. Now, it was my turn. I was going to show them a truth they couldn't deny or escape. The old Nancy was dead. In her place, a patient.com and determined new Nancy was born. My fight would no longer be with shouting or crying. My fight would be with silence, reason, and undeniable proof. They had branded me a liar, locked me in a prison of silence. But what they didn't realize was that silence would be my greatest weapon. The storm was coming and they had no idea the dark clouds gathering in the sky. Asterisk, if the pain in this story touched your heart, too. Could you share in the comments which city and country you're listening from? Knowing that silent cries from all over the world are not alone gives strength to the soul. That moment, standing in front of the window, with my back turned to them, was the first time in my life I felt so alone, and at the same time so strong. They interpreted my silence as surrender, and my turning away as defeat, and left the room. But it wasn't a defeat. It was a declaration of war. My mind sharpened like a hunter, freed from the fog of pain and sorrow. How could I prove this slander? How could I bring the truth to light, while trapped between these four walls, at their mercy? I knew I was alone in this house. Naphtali was no longer my daughter. She had become a shield for her husband. Martin was the enemy himself. I couldn't turn to the neighbors. Family honor came above everything. This was an honor fight I had to win alone. I needed someone who would help me, believe my words, someone of my blood, but untouched by this poison. Then a face came to my mind. A bright, smiling face, my grandson, Boris. The first son from the family's first marriage. He was studying at university in New York. A well-mannered boy, respectful, and most importantly, he loved his grandmother more than anything. Oh, he was my only hope. The only clean thing in this decay. A few months ago, on the day he visited me for the holiday, I remembered how excited he was showing me his new smartphone. Nancy, with this, you can rule the world, he joked. He talked about smart homes. Those tiny security cameras that can watch the house even when no one is home. Back then, all this felt like a fairy tale to me, modern lies that an old woman's mind couldn't grasp. Now, that fairy tale felt like a prayer come true. The idea sprouted and took root in my mind like a seed. A camera watchful eye that never sleeps, never lies, can't be accused of senility. A neutral witness. That thought was both terrifying and exciting at the same time. Could an old woman like me, barely able to use the TV remote, handle such a technological marvel? The fear of the unknown fought fiercely with my desire to prove the truth. Then the winner of that battle was my helplessness. I had to reach Boris, but how could I pick up the phone and say, "Son, your stepdad is robbing me, and your mom is helping him"? He'd think I was crazy and hang up on me. I had to be smart. I needed to plant the idea in his mind like a seed, without showing the whole tree. I waited for the moment I'd be alone in the house. I waited for Naphtali and Martin to go to the market. When that moment came, my hands trembling, I grabbed my old push-button phone. I dialed the number I knew by heart. When I heard Boris's lively voice on the other end, my heart ached. "Hi Grandma, how are you?" I forced my voice to sound as weak and fragile as possible. This wasn't acting. My soul was already tired, and I let it show in my voice. Boris said, "I'm good, sweetie. How could I not be?" I whispered, "You know, old age, loneliness. That wasn't a lie, just a half-truth. I carefully put my plan into action, choosing my words with care. Lately, I haven't been sleeping well, dear. I hear noises in the house. I'm a little scared, being alone. Then I added, I remembered you telling me about those small cameras you can watch through a phone. I wondered if we could install some here, just in case. That way, I could see you too. We'd feel less lonely. My excuse was perfect. It combined a real fear with a grandmother's longing for her grandson. It gave Boris a simple, innocent reason to help me, without revealing the real fight. His reaction was exactly what I hoped for. His voice instantly turned concerned. Don't worry, Grandma. I won't let you be scared. I'm catching the first bus to Detroit. I'll definitely be there by the weekend. We'll fix the camera problem once and for all, and I'll get to enjoy your famous cooking. When I hung up, I took a deep breath. It felt like a heavy burden had lifted. The first step was taken. The plan was starting to work. For the first time in weeks, a light of hope sparked inside me. I was no longer a helpless victim, waiting for the next violation. I was a woman with a plan. My grandson was coming, and along with him, that small watchful eye, the silent witness in this house, would be my secret judge. The rules of the game had changed without them even knowing. From now on, it was they who should be afraid, not me. The 2 days until that weekend felt like 2 centuries to me. I had to keep playing the role of that worn-out, silent old woman, carrying the weight of a secret and a hope inside me. It was even harder than before because now I had hope, and hope changes a person's stance, gaze, even their breathing. I was terrified that they might notice this change, that they might tear away that tiny hope before it had a chance to grow. When the doorbell rang on Saturday morning, my heart felt like it was going to leap out of my chest. It was Boris. His lively presence instantly broke the suffocating, gloomy atmosphere that had settled over the house. Nathalie was happy to see her son. Even Martin, with his usual fake friendliness, played the best stepfather role, saying, "Welcome, Boris." As I hugged my grandson, I tried to show all my love, but with my eyes, I sent a message words could never convey. We need to talk. The hardest task of the day was to create those few minutes alone with Boris. Nathalie was like a shadow, hovering around her son, never leaving his side for a moment. And Martin's unsettling gaze was constantly on us. I felt like a spy carrying out a secret mission behind enemy lines. I had to create that private moment, and I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. I acted out the most convincing part of my role with a perfect excuse that came to mind. I went to my room and pointed to an old, dusty box on top of my wardrobe. I called out to Boris with the helplessness of an old woman in my voice. "Son, my back is really bad. Could you help me bring that box down? It has some memories of the late grandfather. He wants to look at them." This was the perfect excuse to get him alone in my room. The moment the door closed behind us, my posture changed. I spoke in a whisper, but with a determined voice. I didn't say Martin was doing this to me. I couldn't put all that burden on him. Instead, I told him my fear more realistically. I really can't sleep at night anymore. There's no peace in this house. That camera is going to be my only security. Do you understand? My only witness. Boris looked straight into my eyes and saw the pure fear and helplessness there. He never doubted me for a second. He didn't question me further. He just nodded and said words worth more than worlds. "All right, Grandma. Don't you worry. Nobody will even sense it. We'll handle this." His unconditional trust was like a balm for my wounded soul. Our mission had begun. Boris had come prepared. From his bag, he pulled out a small box. Inside was a tiny black adapter that looked like an ordinary phone charger. "This is a camera, Grandma." I was amazed at what I saw. Technology was truly a great blessing. Asterisk, how could something so small and seemingly innocent be my greatest weapon? Now it was time to set up that little spy. We needed to plug it into an outlet that clearly faced the door and the drawer cabinet where I kept the money. Behind my nightstand, we found the perfect spot. Boris plugged in the charger. Then he took out the old smartphone he had brought for me. He patiently explained step by step how to use the single app he installed on it. "Look, Nancy," he said, "you'll only need to tap the green icon right here. That way you can watch your room live. And if you press this red dot, it starts recording." Just then, we heard the footsteps of the family approaching the room. In a panic, Boris quickly slipped the phone into his pocket. I grabbed an old photo album from the box. When the door opened, we pretended to be looking at old pictures. Anne poked her head inside suspiciously and asked, "What are you two sneaking around here for?" I smiled as warmly as I could and replied with the first thing that came to mind, "Oh honey, what else?" We were reminiscing about old days. "Look, this is your elementary school photo. You were so cute." Natalie smiled for a moment, distracted. "All right," she said. "Come to the living room when you're done." After she left, Boris and I exchanged looks. A quiet moment of relief. We had dodged the danger. Before leaving, Boris finished giving me instructions, making sure I understood everything. He told me the recordings would be saved directly to the phone's memory card. Before stepping out, he hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "Be careful, Grandma, and whatever happens, stay strong." That night, after Boris flew back to New York, I was alone in my room, but I was no longer the same Nancy. I looked at the little black charger plugged into the wall. It looked so ordinary, so insignificant. Yet inside it was the all-seeing eye that would bring me justice. It was my silent witness, never blinking. I held the old smartphone in my palms. It felt heavy like a weapon. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for the mouse to take the bait, and I knew it would come. In the middle of the night, it would open that door again. But this time, I wouldn't be a helpless victim lurking in the dark. This time, I was the director of that scene. I would watch everything unfold right from the palm of my hand. The wait would be unbearable. But thinking of that final moment sent a chilling determination through me. After Boris left, a new kind of silence settled over the house. This was no longer the silence of my helplessness or their victory. This was the silence of my patience and my plan. Asterisk, I was carrying a secret inside me that no one knew. And this secret had given me a calm strength and confidence I hadn't felt in years. My shoulders were no longer slumped, and my gaze was no longer downcast. My husband, Martin, unaware of this change, was continuing his despicable routine. He was convinced he had completely defeated me, broken my spirit, and convinced both my daughter and me of this lie that I was just a crazy, senile woman. In his eyes, I was a woman resigned to her fate. Finished. My daughter, Natalie, on the other hand, seemed relieved. Her mother's dreams and slanders were finally over. To her, this had become a kind of normal. She interpreted her mother's silence either as a sign that she had come to her senses, or that her senility had deepened, causing her to retreat into herself. Believing her mother was crazy was an easier, less painful path for her, then facing the possibility that her father might be a monster. I watched them like I was sitting in the front row of a play. I saw Martin's arrogant looks and the family's willful blindness to everything right in front of them. Sometimes, when I was right there, they would talk about me as if I weren't there, or couldn't understand what they were saying. Martin would say to Nathalie, "Isn't your mother calmer today? Look, she's slowly accepting everything." I pretended not to hear and kept reading my book. But the truth was, I was the one not accepting them. Now, every night before I went to sleep, I had a new ritual. I would take that old smartphone in my hand and, with a surprisingly steady finger, press the red record button. It was a silent rebellion against their world. A tiny touch, but worth the world to me. And the first recording happened a few nights after Boris left. My heart couldn't bear to watch it live at the time. The next morning, after making sure no one was home, I locked my bedroom door and played the video. That granny, watching the dark footage, felt my hands start trembling again. The door slowly creaked open. Martin's dark silhouette slipped inside, his movements so confident, so familiar. He went straight to my drawer. He took the money from inside me. For a moment, he hesitated and looked at that motionless shadow under the blanket. Me. Then, as if nothing had happened, he left the room. The pain I felt watching that footage was indescribable, but stronger than the pain was the crushing relief of being proven right. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lying. I was a victim. And now, I was the clearest witness to my own violation. I recorded that video carefully. The following week, I recorded another one. Then another. Like a spider, patiently weaving its web. I was gathering my evidence one by one. Each recording was a nail hammered into Martin's coffin of false innocence. I had to keep this secret inside me, while maintaining my calm and distant demeanor outside. This new calmness of mine was their first crack. It was a strange thing they couldn't understand. A defeated person behaves like they're defeated. But I looked peaceful. This didn't fit any equation they knew. One day, I overheard Naphtali telling Martin, "Mom has been acting really strange lately, extremely quiet. It's like she's living in another world." Martin replied carelessly, "Forget it. This is better. At least we don't have headaches." But I could see that even Martin was quietly disturbed by this situation. Now, when he entered a room, I no longer flinched or looked away from his eyes. On the contrary, I looked straight at his face. But not with fear or anger, with a calm, almost pitying expression. Those looks of mine unsettled him, but he couldn't figure out why. The power balance inside the house had changed completely. Without their knowledge, they still saw themselves as the hunters and me as the prey. But what they didn't know was that the prey had now set the traps and was waiting for the hunter's weakest moment. Their arrogance and ignorance were my greatest advantage. I now had everything I needed. 3 recordings from 3 different nights, undeniable, unquestionable concrete evidence. The question was no longer whether I would reveal the truth. The question was when and how I would do it. I had to choose such a moment, such a scene, that the impact would be devastating, and the outcome inevitable. My silent patience was about to give way to a carefully calculated action. The hunter was armed, and now only waiting for the right time to strike. Waiting, after gathering the evidence, was perhaps the hardest part. I was no longer waiting like a victim lying in ambush. I was waiting like a hunter deciding when to pull the trigger of the weapon in hand. The stormy sea inside me had calmed into a quiet but determined waiting. I was ready. I was just waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity. But I couldn't keep this silent wait forever. I had to throw the first stone at their fortress and stir the waters a little. I had to make them feel that I was no longer a ghost in that house, but a presence they had to reckon with. This wouldn't be a direct attack. It would be a seed of doubt I planted in their souls. That opportunity came a few days later at a dinner. One of those rare evenings when we all sat at the same table. The atmosphere in the house was as heavy as ever, and the conversation felt fake. That day, my son-in-law Martin was bragging about how cleverly he had closed a deal at work. He was proud of his own wit. He saw himself as the smartest, most cunning man in the world. Natalie listened to him with admiring eyes, hanging on every word her husband said. "Well done, honey," she said. "You're so smart." She smiled proudly. I quietly sipped my soup, watching this small, pathetic play unfold. Their fake happiness made me sick. Martin turned to me, filled with the arrogance fueled by his own story and his wife's praise. His face carried that same forced look of concern. "Nancy," my mother said, "why don't you ever say anything? You've drifted off again." This was a mocking jab at my so-called senility. He was belittling me, trying to make fun of me. In that moment, I knew the time I had been waiting for had come. I slowly set my spoon down on the edge of my bowl. I lifted my eyes, but didn't look directly at Martin. It was as if I were speaking to a higher power present in the room, but invisible. My voice was calm, clear, and completely devoid of emotion. "Humans," I began, "like to boast about their intelligence. But they forget that even the smartest plans, even the darkest deeds, done in the dead of night, are seen and known by someone." When I finished, there was a deep silence at the table. The weight of my words hung heavily in the air. Then I fixed my gaze straight into Martin's eyes. Without blinking, I added the final, most cutting line: "Everything has its time." The atmosphere at the table froze instantly. The clinking of knives and forks stopped. At first, Natalie looked confused. Then her face crumpled with worry, as usual. She let out a noticeable sigh. "Mom, you've started with those deep, meaningless sayings again. At least give us some peace at the table." To her, these were just my old-age ramblings. Meaningless religious nonsense. But Martin's reaction was very different. For a moment, a wave of fear and panic flashed across his face. His confident smirk vanished instantly. He understood the hidden meaning, the implication behind my words. He avoided my gaze and nervously grabbed the glass of water in front of him, taking a big gulp. My eyes were not the eyes of a rambling old woman speaking nonsense. He knew that, seeing his reaction, I realized I had succeeded in planting the seed of doubt right in his heart. I had shown him I knew more than he thought I did. I had unsettled him. I had cracked the fortress he thought was impenetrable, even if just a little. From now on, he wouldn't sleep peacefully at night. I said not another word on the subject. Calmly, I turned back to my soup and finished my meal, as if nothing had happened. My calmness was even more infuriating to Martin. It was a calculated strike, precise, hitting its target, then disappearing. I had left him alone with his suspicions and fears. That night, for the first time, Martin looked at me, not with contempt, but with a hint of fear. That harmless, senile old woman. Just moments ago, he had fired a warning shot at his own ship. He started wondering how much more I knew. What else I had uncovered. The first cracks in his confidence showed up that evening at dinner. After finishing my meal, I quietly got up from the table and retreated to my room. Behind me, I left a confused and angry daughter and a son-in-law shaken to his core. The first arrow had hit its target. The psychological war had officially begun. By now, I knew that the big confrontation was not far off. I just had to pick the right time and place to reveal my undeniable truth. I was going to turn that quietly growing fear inside him into a cold, concrete fact. I chose a Sunday morning for the big showdown. That day, my late husband's brother, Uncle Kenny, and his wife were coming for breakfast. They were the wise ones of our family, the respected voices who decided what was true. My grandson Boris, as if by coincidence, had flown in from New York. That weekend, my court was set, my jury ready. Now all that was left was to wait for the defendants to confess their crimes with their own mouths. From the outside, the atmosphere inside the house looked like a happy family breakfast. The air smelled of freshly brewed tea and warm simmet sesame bread rings. Naphtali was playing the perfect hostess, bustling back and forth. Martin was showing proper respect to Uncle Kenny, spreading smiles around, but under the table, there was only a tense electric current between me and him. He had spent the entire week on edge. He kept watching me closely, trying to guess my next move. I sipped my tea calmly and talked about trivial things. I was patient, because I knew that whoever saved their biggest ace for last always won. And I was waiting for the perfect moment to drive my biggest ace straight into his heart. And that moment came. Once again, from my daughter Naphtali. Perhaps feeling the need to justify herself or seek sympathy in front of our relatives, she sighed and turned to Uncle Kenny. "Oh, Uncle," she said, "it's so hard dealing with Mom. Old age is tough. People don't know what they're saying or doing anymore. She's a big burden for us, but what can we do? She's our mother. She's the crown of our head." As she said this, she played the role of the self-sacrificing daughter perfectly. And that was the moment. The perfect scene prepared for me. With these words, everyone's eyes turned to me, filled with pity. Martin nodded sadly, approving his wife's words. In their eyes, I was a pathetic, miserable woman, a burden. At that moment, I realized I had to end this game. I slowly placed my tea glass back onto its saucer. The tiny click sound as the glass met the saucer cut through all the noise in the room. A deep silence fell. I looked each person at the table in the eye, one by one. There was neither anger nor sorrow on my face. Just a serious, determined expression. My voice was clearer and more confident than ever before. "Yes," I said. "Old age is a difficult craft. Sometimes people get confused about what's real and what's a dream. If that's the case, let's all see together who's dreaming and who's telling the truth." Those words hit the table like a bomb. Before anyone could understand what was happening, I stood up. I walked straight to the big screen TV standing in the corner of the room. Just as we had planned, Boris also stood up and handed me a small cable from his pocket. Asterisk. Natalie and Martin watched in horror, trying to understand what I was doing. A slow-growing fear began to show on their faces. "Mom, what are you doing?" Naphtali asked, her voice trembling. I didn't answer her. With surprisingly steady hands, I connected my phone to the TV. I opened the gallery on the phone's screen. My finger hovered over the first video for a moment. I glanced at Martin one last time. His face was as pale as chalk. He understood. He knew what I was about to do, what I was about to show them. But it was already too late. I pressed play. Seconds ago, the giant screen had been playing a documentary. Now it was filled with dark footage from my bedroom. Everyone at the table held their breath, leaning forward, eyes fixed on the screen. I will never forget that silence. For the rest of my life. The images revealed the betrayal, in all its raw, naked truth. The slow opening of my bedroom door, Martin's familiar silhouette, slipping inside like a thief. His unsettling glances around the room. Opening the drawer and slipping bills into his pocket. Everything was so clear that denial was impossible. When the first video ended, I immediately played the second. Then the third. 3 different nights, 3 different thefts, 3 different betrayals. The evidence was mercilessly laid bare for everyone to see. Not a sound was heard in the room. The only noise was the dull, disturbing rustling coming from the phone. When the last video finished, I turned off the phone, unplugged the cable from the TV, and slowly walked back to the table. I didn't have to say a single word. Those videos spoke for me, screaming the whole truth. The great confrontation didn't happen with words, but with cold, concrete, merciless images. My silent revenge was complete. The judgment wasn't handed down by me, it was delivered by the truth itself. I looked around at everyone's faces. Uncle Kenny's face was twisted with anger. Natalie's was a portrait of devastation, like a real slap had just landed hard across her face. And Martin, stripped of all his lies, stood exposed under his family's unforgiving gaze. A storm had broken loose. Now, all that was left was to pick up the pieces of the wreckage. The silence that fell after the last video was as deep as a grave. Time had stopped. Breaths were held. I sat calmly and proudly in my seat at the table. There was no need for me to speak, shout, or accuse anymore. My silence was my greatest victory. All eyes in the room were fixed on the 2 culprits standing in the center. The first to break the silence was my Uncle Kenny. He slowly pushed back his chair with a creak. That sound echoed like thunder in the absolute quiet. When he stood up, his face was twisted in anger, like a dark storm cloud ready to burst. He wasn't just the symbol of my wounded pride, but of the entire family's trampled honor. His eyes didn't look at me, or the rest of the family. Instead, his full wrath locked onto Martin, who sat at the table with his head down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Uncle Kenny's voice was cold and sharp, like a judge reading out a death sentence. "You," he said to Martin, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, "you are the one who has destroyed this family's dignity." His words struck like a whip. "You hurt our mother, the crown of our heads in her old age, Nancy, my beloved brother's legacy. You preyed on her small pension, the money she needed. And then you had the audacity to sit here at this table, to eat our bread." Each word was like a sledgehammer smashing down on Martin's false facade. Martin tried to defend himself with a desperate stammer. "I swear, Kenny, it's just a misunderstanding." But my uncle cut him off like a roaring lion. "Silence. Was the footage we just watched a misunderstanding too? Thief." That last word hung heavy in the air. It was a permanent stain, branded on Martin's forehead forever. All attention now turned to the family. They were a complete wreck. On one side, a disgraced husband. On the other, a mother sitting tall and proud. The perfect life Martin had sold out was now shattered before her eyes. She couldn't hold back anymore. First came silent sobs, then a pain so deep and full of shame and horror, it shook her whole body. Between her tears, she turned to me, her voice barely a whisper. "Mom, please, forgive me." That was the first confession of regret. But it was too late. A broken heart never heals the same way again. The damage she caused couldn't be fixed with a simple sorry. I looked at her, saw the pain and shame in her eyes. For a moment, the ancient maternal instinct inside me stirred to comfort my crying child, to hold her close. But I suppressed that urge. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. I just looked her in the eyes. My face empty, neither forgiveness nor anger. That moment, I realized some forgiveness is impossible, even with time. Uncle Kenny gave his final verdict. He turned to Martin and commanded, "You get out of this house right now. And never come near this family again. Not even from afar. When Naphtali comes back, she will make her own choice. Either she leaves with this thief, or she stays here with Nancy and her family's honor." Martin didn't utter another word. He stood up, weighed down by the full weight of defeat, and headed to the door. The family watched him leave, in a silence heavy with hatred. The door closed behind him with a firm, definitive click. An era had ended with that door closing. He was left to face the wreckage he created alone. Naphtali was still crying uncontrollably. She had no answer to that question. Her fall was just as painful as her husband's. She had lost her husband, the family's respect, and worst of all, her mother's trust and love. Her remorse was real. But it wasn't born from believing her mother, it came from the shame of being disgraced. As I watched everything unfold, I felt neither the thrill of victory nor any pleasure in their pain. Only a deep, weary sadness. Justice had been served. But at what cost? The family was shattered. The sacred bond between my only child and me might have been broken forever. The great storm had passed, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Martin was gone. Naphtali was a broken woman, drowning in shame. Justice had shown its harshest face. But as I sat there, feeling my grandson Boris's supportive hand on my shoulder, I knew this wasn't the end. Now, the hardest part was just beginning to build a new life from this rubble. And to decide if a bond so deeply broken could ever truly be repaired. Strangely, that victory felt more like a loss. After that stormy Sunday, I never stayed another night in that house. My soul was so tired, so wounded, those walls seemed to close in on me. The memories were poisoned, the air heavy with betrayal. After Uncle Kenny and the other guests left, my grandson Boris came to my room and helped me pack my things. A few clothes, some books, a photo of my late husband. All my wealth fit into a small bag. As I was leaving the house, Naphtali stood by the door like a shadow, exhausted, eyes swollen from crying, a wreck. She didn't try to stop me. What could she say? What words could erase the painful truth playing on the screen? I walked out that door without looking back once. I was leaving not just a house, but a life, a lifelong disappointment, and shattered expectations. My new life began in my grandson Boris's tiny student apartment in New York. It couldn't compare to my daughter's spacious, bright home. Everywhere was books, youth, and chaos. But to me, that small apartment was a palace, because its walls were built with respect, love, and, most importantly, the deep peace I had longed for all these years. Now, I woke up not to tense silence, but to the vibrant hum of the city. Before Boris left for university, I made him breakfast with my own hands. My days passed fearlessly. I picked up a book, or stepped out onto his tiny balcony, watching life go by without a single worry. I felt like I was breathing again. Boris treated me like a queen, not a burden. He did everything he could to make me comfortable, asked my opinion on things, and listened with interest to the old stories I shared. When his friends came over, he introduced me proudly. "This is my grandma, Nancy." That honor he gave me was worth more than 1,000 apologies from Naphtali. The difference between the two homes was like night and day. In Naphtali's house, I was a ghost, an invisible burden. In Boris's tiny apartment, I was the heart of the home. My presence brought warmth and order to that place. I was no longer unwanted, but needed and valued. My dignity was being rebuilt. Step by step, Natalie's phone calls started a week after I left. Every time she called, she cried. Begged me, wanted me to come back. "Mom, the house is empty without you. Nothing tasted right anymore. Please, come back. I made a mistake. It was ignorance. Please forgive me." Her voice full of regret. I listened quietly. She wasn't yelling or blaming. She wasn't digging up old wounds. My voice was soft, but firm. "Daughter," I said to her each time, "a broken vase, even if glued back together, will never hold water the same way again. A human heart is just like that. My peace is here now. You need to rebuild your own life. Find your own path." This was my new boundary. I wasn't closing the door completely on my daughter, but I refused to go back to the source of my pain. For the first time in my life, I was putting my own mental health first, not someone else's happiness. At 73, I rediscovered the incredible power of saying no. I learned a lot during this process. Love does not guarantee respect. I realized my honor was a fortress I had to protect with my own hands, not something others just gave me. My silent revenge wasn't about destroying them, it was a fight to save myself. There was no hatred left inside me, only a deep sadness for the daughter I lost. But my peace was more important than that sadness. I had found a new family by my grandson's side, Boris, built on the solid foundations of trust and respect. That was enough for me. One evening, Boris and I sat on the balcony drinking tea. We no longer talked about the past, those dark days. We talked about his classes and a new recipe I wanted to try. It was a simple, humble picture of happiness, earned through struggle. My honor was restored, not by their apologies, but by my own actions, by choosing to leave that house, by building a new life for myself. And most importantly, by finding peace in a place where I was truly respected. I was no longer just Natalie's mother. I was Mrs. Nancy. I had found my refuge. The war was over, and though I carried my scars, I had come out standing tall. Only one question remained unanswered. Asterisk, this question was no longer about them, it was about me. Could I truly forgive them, not for their sake, but for the peace of my own soul? And what did asking for forgiveness even mean, when the trust holding everything together was gone forever? The greatest lessons hadn't yet been fully learned. Life teaches its deepest lessons through the most painful wounds. I experienced this harsh truth in the autumn of my life. When those stormy days were behind me, and I laid my head on the pillow at night, I no longer thought about the pain. I thought about what the pain had taught me. Everything I had gone through gave me unforgettable lessons about life, people, and most of all, myself. My first lesson was about how sacred, yet fragile, family bonds truly are. I used to believe the bond between a mother and child was the strongest force in the world. But I learned that if this Babel wasn't nurtured with respect and truth, it could shatter at the slightest tremor. Love alone wasn't enough to keep a fortress standing. The mortar that held that fortress together was trust, and when trust is broken, even the strongest fortress crumbles. Our elders wisely said, "A mother is not a burden like a homeland, nor a place like Baghdad. But when a child starts to see their mother not as a beloved, but as a burden, the richness of that homeland slips away. I understood that respect isn't something that automatically comes with age. Respect, like love, is something you earn every day, a choice that requires effort and care. And when that choice is not made, the foundation of the family begins to rot. As for my husband Martin, he taught me what greed and ambition can do to a person. He didn't just steal money. He stole my honor, the peace of that home, and the natural right of a mother to feel safe and secure. I saw how greed blinds the eyes, how it darkens the heart and soul. For the sake of a few bills, he lost his family, his dignity, and his humanity. If my daughter was the family's sin, it wasn't greed but cowardice. The fear of being alone, the fear that her second marriage would fail, had blinded her to reality. Instead of facing a hard truth, she chose to hide behind a comfortable lie. I learned that sometimes, those who are silent accomplices are more guilty than the ones who commit the crime. Because their silence and denial allow that evil to take root and grow. One of the greatest lessons I learned came from the word home. I realized that the big house where Naphtali and I lived was just a building made of cold walls. A home isn't built with walls, it's built with trust, peace, and love. Now, in my grandson's tiny apartment, I had finally found a real home. It wasn't the size of the home that mattered, but the size of the peace inside it. They thought I was weak, old, and done for. They mistook my silence for helplessness, but they underestimated me. I learned that true strength doesn't come from shouting or calling out, but from silent patience and unshakable determination. As our ancestors said, the quietest waters run the deepest. I discovered a power within myself I hadn't even been aware of before. Everything I went through was actually a battle for truth. I saw that no matter how deeply buried the truth is, it has a habit of eventually rising to the surface. My little camera was just a tool. The real power was truth itself. It carried a weight no one could resist, a light that illuminated all lies. I don't believe I punished them. They prepared their own punishment with their own hands. You reap what you sow, as they say. Martin's greed led to his disgrace. Natali's betrayal condemned her to shame and loneliness. Life has a way of balancing its scales. Sooner or later, and my grandson Boris, he was the bright side of this dark story. He was proof that kindness, loyalty, and respect still exist. In this world, my faith in Naphtali was deeply shaken, but thanks to him, it was not completely lost. He was an unexpected blessing born from this terrible crisis. I thought a lot about forgiveness. I realized that forgiveness isn't about ignoring their guilt or pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness is about uprooting the poison of hatred and anger from my own heart. It's something I had to do for myself, not for them. It didn't mean reconciliation. It meant finding peace. This is my story, but I know it's also the story of many silent mothers, fathers, and grandparents. It's a reminder to all children. That old body you see as a burden today is the very body that once carried you on its shoulders. Their memories may fade, but their hearts never forget your first steps, your first smiles. Now, I look out from the small window of Boris's apartment. I lost a daughter, but I found myself. I lost a house, but I gained a true home. Life takes with one hand, but always gives something with the other. At last, the scales have balanced for me. And today I live not in the shadows of the past, but in the light of the present. I sit on the balcony of my grandson Boris's tiny student apartment, watering the geraniums and pelargoniums I planted in pots. Asterisk, I'm nurturing a new life with my own hands. These tiny plants are symbols of my renewed hold on life, proof that even after the rubble, I can still create beauty. He sits beside me, and for a while, we simply watch the tired but magnificent view of New York stretching out before us in silence. This silence is no longer tension, but a deep love and understanding. The peaceful calm of two companions, two confidants. We no longer talk about those painful days. He tells me a funny story from his university days. I tell him I'll make his favorite dish tomorrow, dumplings. This ordinary, simple, everyday conversation feels like the greatest luxury to me, because this is exactly what a fearless, normal life looks like. Just then, my old phone left. In the other room, rings. Only a few people call this phone. Boris looks at me with a question in his eyes. I see the screen. It's Naphtali. I calmly nod and answer. There's no pounding in my chest, no anger. Just a quiet acceptance. The voice on the other end is no longer angry or defensive. It's small, broken, and constantly pleading. "Mom, how are you?" she says. She just wanted to hear my voice. It carries the traces of endless regret. I answer her without coldness, but keeping my distance. "I'm fine, daughter. How are you?" My reply is kind but firm. The old Nancy who would always rush to help is gone. I'm a new woman who puts her own peace above everything. Naphtali brings up the same old topics. How Martin left. How lonely she is at home. How much of a mistake she made. And finally, she asks the question she always asks at the end of every call. "Mom, will you ever forgive me?" I watch the sunset, the sky painted with the colors of my daughter. I don't give her the answer she wants to hear, because I know forgiveness is not just a word. Forgiveness is a peace that lives in the heart, and I'm still trying to put together the last missing pieces of my own peace. I gently hang up. "Take care, daughter," I say. When I hang up, I feel neither anger nor victorious intoxication. Just a quiet melancholy for what's been lost, and deep gratitude for what I still have. I turn to my grandson, who watches me with concern. Boris takes my hand in his palm. "Are you okay, Grandma?" he asks. I look at him with a smile so genuine and peaceful, it's unlike any I've shown in years. "I'm very well, my son," I say. I'm more at peace now than I've ever been in my life. The storm of life has passed. All that's left are broken memories and hard-learned lessons. But from the rubble, I built a fortress of peace that no one can ever tear down again. And that fortress is my greatest victory in this life. I hope Nancy's touching journey of justice and peace has shed some light on your hearts too. If our story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more life lessons like this. Asterisk.